Activity, I requested not to
Okay.
hold it.
Is that me?
I don't know whether it's you or me.
I will be the one that's not making noise. I'll just, everything I,
Uh-oh. Is it when you're making a noise or something? Or when you move it or something?
you're very sensitive maybe. Yours is like mine. Yours is like this one. No, it's just the electromagnetic field sensitive thing. I can't hold on to a mic for 2 hours.
Well, welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming. We're very excited to have these ladies here to give us some wisdom from their past experiences. I will just go ahead and introduce each of them a little bit. So this is Laura Koontz, and she has been married to Trent for going on 22 years. They live on a farm in rural Oakville where they raise corn, beans, and kids. Oh, and chickens. They have 5 kids. The oldest, Allison, will graduate from SCC in May. Oren is a junior in high school. Emily is a freshman. Abe is in 6th grade, and Hannah, their baby, is a 4th grader. Laura is in her 14th year of homeschooling. Spending time with her family, reading, gardening, and baking are some of her favorite things. And this is Nancy Skewball. And if you guys remember the last panel discussion, Lois Skewball is her daughter. So just so you can connect to that. Nancy is a child of God, the wife of Greg, a mom of 4, a grandma of 3, which they're all here. They homeschooled all 4 of their children for all of their school years except for 6th grade for one of them. Their youngest is currently a junior in high school. And this is Sharon Pilling. Sharon was born and raised in Iowa and became a believer in 8th grade. She heard about homeschooling when she was just 18 years old from some friends at church and immediately embraced the concept. However, homeschooling was illegal in most states, including Iowa at the time. Having heard that if you had your teaching certificate, most states would leave you alone, her major in college was confirmed, elementary education. Years later, Sharon married a farmer, Jim, in 1986. Jim and Sharon have a total of 3 children, and thankfully, homeschooling was legalized in Iowa the year their oldest turned 4. All of their children were educated using the skills of their parents, fellow homeschooling parents, loving relatives, Sunday school teachers, pastors, and in the final years, community college too. All of their children have graduated from college with either 2 or 4-year degrees and are now married and raising their own children in the Lord, for which Sharon and Jim give him praise. So, these are our ladies to discuss today what they would have done differently. So, welcome to them. So, I guess we'll start with the first question. If you could change anything relationally that you did for or with or for your children, what would it be? And any of you guys can pick this one up and go for it.
I'll go ahead. I would have given them a safer place to share their emotions. When they shared with anger, then what I did was, if they used any kind of disrespect or anything in the process of sharing their emotions, especially anger, then I camped out on correcting the manner in which they shared rather than getting at the source of why they were upset and what they were upset with. And so I don't know that, I think the pattern got established that then they didn't always feel like they had a safe place to come with their emotions, which when you homeschool and you're about their only person that they've got around them is not a good thing for them. So I often did pray too for them to have adult Christians in their lives where they could feel like they had a safe place. So they had their Aunt Julie and their grandma and a couple homeschool moms. And then one other thing I would have done differently relationally has to do with discipline. It was hard to figure out what privileges to give or take, and so we did sometimes the hopefully good positive peer pressure, like let's have a movie night if everybody gets their schoolwork done, or let's have a game night if everybody gets their schoolwork done. Well, nobody ever got their schoolwork done, so then everybody got punished. And I wish I'd tried the other way where we singled out the one that didn't, and they got isolated in the house and the rest of us had fun, so that we could see if that worked. But so I would have done that part differently, and that might have helped the whole family relationships, and we would have had more game nights and more movie nights.
Well, I could ditto all of that, but it's not what I wrote down. So, one of the things that I think I would go back and try to do differently, and still can a little bit here, but is to have more purposeful attention that I pay to the what I would call easy kids. I don't know if you, I assume probably all of you have some that are more challenging than others. And especially when it came to homeschooling, the academic side, I had one, maybe two different reasons that were really challenging, and it took a lot of my time. And so the easier ones kind of slipped through the cracks as far as, they didn't, squeaky wheel gets the oil kind of situation. So I would try to be more intentional that way. And really along those same lines, I would encourage my husband to spend a little more time with the children that weren't as easy for him to relate to. I mean, we all have our ones that just seem more like us, or maybe aren't more like us, and we get along easier or whatever. But I think those are two things that I would really try to change. And then I did put down not yells, and then I put so much, because there's times when they can all be pushing your buttons at the same time, and there's lots of forgiveness I had to ask for, but so.
Yeah, well, I know that was one thing that was important to me when we started homeschooling our kids, is that I wanted to have a good relationship with our kids, because like you guys said, I mean, you're together all the time. And so it's not like you have, kind of this chunk of time where they're not there, and you can kind of refocus and kind of, when they're home, okay, now we're going to start over, I'm going to be happy, like all of my warts and all of their warts are available 24/7, and so just a lot of trial and error, like, I'd feel frustrated because, for instance, I remember my oldest, she and I would butt heads a lot, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it, because it wasn't that she was like openly disobeying me or anything, but it'd be like she just always had a way that was a different idea that wasn't mom's, And so we've got this homeschool situation. It's my first kid, and you're trying to figure things out, and I could see that our relationship was not doing very well. And so, I mean, I just thank God that a lot of times he had a way of kind of just nudging me and being like, hey, you need to work on this relationship or that one, and figure out what the problem is. And a lot of times, if you really think it through, you can figure out what the root problem is, and then praying about it and doing what I need to do on my end, but just praying for wisdom, but how to approach it with my daughter. Like I know with my daughter in that case, just realizing when I finally figured out that we are just two people wanting to be in charge, and then being able to give her that freedom to be in charge when it was appropriate, but calling her out on it when she needed to be respectful of my authority. But I just think, just with the kids in general, just like what you said about the easy kids that get totally lost in the shuffle because they're always doing what they're supposed to, and they're just getting neglected, and just asking God to put that on my heart to which kid needs some attention. Because I know my husband and I, we really wanted to have a good relationship with our kids, and that was more important than reading and writing and arithmetic. And so it's kind of just, I feel like it's kind of a learn as you go, as I'm sure you're all figuring out too. I mean, when things aren't going well, just being able to pray about it and ask God to help you adjust your sails and figure out what you can do to kind of just be proactive about that kind of stuff. So my kids are not raised, so we'll see how many need therapy when we're done, but so, I mean, we're doing the best we can, and we really enjoy our family, but like I say, I feel like the jury is still out. So anyway.
Well, the next question is, if you could change anything spiritually that you did with or for your children, what would it be? Anyone can jump in.
I was just going to say, I'm realizing it more. I just have one left at home. Well, I have one that's still in school. 2 living at home still. But with this, my last child, it's harder I'd like to be more proactive and a little better with Bible memory work and Bible studies, and we are trying to do that. I just found it so much easier, and I'm not sure why, when I had more kids, to read together, to sing together, and to do different studies or activities together. I don't know, it's just easier. And it seemed backwards in some ways, but for me it was easier, and it's taking more effort, I guess, with one child to have that one-on-one and not make it seem silly or just like a chore to mark off. I don't know, so.
I can see where you're coming from with that, because when you have all your kids home, like we're all doing this together.
Mm-hmm.
But then because we have my older daughter is in school now, and my older son, a lot of times he's working, and so then there's just the three.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't like we're all doing our family worship together, and everything, and in the morning and Bible time and that. And so you're just adjusting to that new season and making sure that it doesn't. Yeah, I know what you mean about that. Just that it's easier when there's a group, because I don't know.
It did seem easier. I don't know why, but yeah.
Well, I would have had them memorize more scripture as well when their brains can do it. Lots easier than our brains could do it. And sometimes I wanted to do it with them, so I think it held them back because it took me, I couldn't keep up. And so I tried to learn piano with them too, and that did not work either. So, and then I would have prayed more with them individually. Like you said, with the group, you pray together as a family, you pray together in family worship and at the table and at bedtime, but to pray with them one-on-one, I would have done more of that, which is partly relational too on that first question, but I think and praying for them in their presence with, even if they didn't want to pray for them that way. So.
I think I agree with you that it seems like when you pray for them, even in their presence, when you guys are struggling or something like that, it has a power that, that lecturing or whatever doesn't. And
it allows you to be humble, because you can't pray and not. The Lord brings you to the humility during your prayer time, because then you realize, I was the one that was wrong here, not them.
Yeah. So I pray that I can say like these two said that their children are walking with the Lord. Because that was something that was really important to us, was that we give them a good spiritual foundation and disciple them a lot. And from growing up, I was raised in a Christian home, and I'm so thankful for that. My parents, I would say, were more probably formal with their faith. And so, we didn't really, we were trained to obey them and to love God, and they read the Bible, and they're very faithful and everything like that. But I would say that we didn't have a lot of discipling. I can't ever remember, mom or dad praying with us, or specifically about certain things. It was more just we pray before our meals, and, pray before you go to bed and that sort of thing, and I'm very thankful for that. And so I don't really know how the Lord laid it on my heart or whatever, that I wanted to have more of a, personal relationship with our kids, with the Lord and everything. And so I don't know, God just kind of put people in my path before we even had kids. And so we started, like you said, scripture memory with the kids when they were old enough to talk. And that was really exciting for me, because I couldn't memorize anything. And I was learning, like you said, right along with them, and which was making me laugh when she said we're the worst ones, because we are. They've about got it nailed, and I'm trying to say it with them because I'm wanting to memorize it as well. And I'm the one that's always, ruining it, but... I did learn that adults can learn. It just takes a lot longer. But these guys, it just has really been exciting to me to see how what they memorize as children, it sticks. Even if they're a little rusty, if you pull it out again, it's there. And I'm really excited about, because of what the Bible says about that if we hide his word in our hearts, and just that his word will not return to him void. And so, and then also just I had good mentors and resources for to take time to pray with them, pray through things with them, and pray with them, and pray together out loud as a family. Take turns praying with the kids, or having the kids take turns praying, like different times, and also just the privilege of when they're having discipline issues, being able to pray about it together. And I feel like that their hearts have been soft that way. And so of our kids, our oldest has trusted Jesus as her Savior, and she's been baptized. And our other kids haven't made a personal decision, but it has brought me a lot of peace and joy to see that they have a love for the Lord, and they have soft hearts, and they are approachable. And I feel like that helps a lot when you're trying to raise your kiddos, just that their hearts are soft and they're willing to, work on things with you, just in the nature of things. So anyway, I'm kind of feel like I'm rambling, but I just think that the relational and the spiritual aspect of things, if that can be our priorities when we're trying to raise our kids, it matters more than math and science, and it actually makes math and science easier to deal with, when it's not going well. But anyway, so sorry for talking too much.
I was just going to say, you mentioned about our children walking with the Lord, and that is one of the greatest blessings that we have, my husband and I, and Jim and Sharon too. But I know a lot of parents out there who have, done all the right things that don't have that. And so it's just a matter for just continual prayer, and know that God's timing, and he is in control. It doesn't, we can mess up and not do all the right relational things, and they still turn out okay. And we can also, do what we think is all the right thing, and they still don't choose the right path. But as long as they're still living, there's still that time for them to turn around and for God to reach out and bring them to him. So I just want to, anybody out there that is, concerned with that or has that struggle, I just know that others are praying for your kids too, and that's wonderful. And it's all God's timing. We can't do the right things. We look back at what we should have done, or what, we're talking about what would you have done differently? Well, I didn't. So, you do what you can, and what the moment is, and God works with that, whether it's good or bad. So.
Well, and for me, I was not even raised in a Christian home, so nobody was praying for me that I know of, and nobody was doing any of that, and still the Lord rescued us. It's always the Lord who saves, not any of us as parents or grandparents or anybody. I can't think of much spiritual heritage that was behind me in my knowledge at all. It was just that the Lord chose me out of the midst of that. And so it's always him. I mean, we even talk about how he raises them in spite of us, not because of us. And yeah, sure, he uses us, but he's still doing the work.
I maybe should have made the point more that we should pray for others.
It's a baptismal vow in our denomination,
right,
that we are to pray for the baptized children of the church, and that's something that we probably all fall short on. It's hard enough to remember to pray for your own and your grandchildren.
I agree, and I know that Mom and I have had this discussion too, and she's be like, oh, I wish, we would have done this or that different. I was like, Mom, I'm like, the Bible is full of people that God used, and it's so hard to find anyone, but except for maybe Joseph or something, that didn't, that wasn't a very imperfect person. And the other thing I've thought of too is that like I think as moms, especially when our kids are little, like we're used to controlling every aspect of their life, and you can have somewhat of, you can do that. I mean, you try, but when it comes to their hearts, that's between them and God, and I think we love them so much that we want them to choose the Lord, and we want to see them having the relationship that we do with the Lord, but we, like you said, we cannot do that. And just realizing that it's the Lord that calls, and I know I think it was a Rachel Jankovic book, Loving the Little Years or something like that I read, and she talks about being fruit, like the apple tree. It's there, and it bears, its job is to produce apples. And whether the apples that the apple tree grows, whether they get picked and used and everything, or whether they just fall to the ground and rot, and it doesn't matter. The apple is the tree is growing the apples, and that's like, as moms, we are planting, and we're doing what God wants us to do, and we're not worrying about the harvest. We know we want a good harvest, but that's God's work, and so that we just need to do what God calls us to do and let him take care of the details or whatever. And so that comforts me, because like you said, there's like so much that we do that we feel like so inadequate about or failures about, but it's good to know that God, that's what God does his best work with. And so, he's good at redeeming our feeble offerings.
Well, I appreciate you guys bringing that up. So I feel like that's something I've been trying to learn lately, is that it's God that gives the strength, and it's God that takes all of our weaknesses, and we're just called to be faithful, and he's the one that's fruitful. So I appreciate you guys bringing that up. So the next question is, if you could change anything academically that you did with or for your kids, what would it be?
I have several. But this was a fun one to think through, though. We would have taken more field trips, especially to the museums and things like that. There's so many treasures all around us in Iowa that we just got to stay home and get the schoolwork done instead of going to enjoy all these wonderful things that are also educational and are part of the heritage of being in Iowa. We would have gotten our oldest, who was a boy, Daniel, more involved in the farming. It was really hard because Jim's dad died when Daniel was just 1 year old, and his brother came to farm with us the next year. And so he had his brother to farm with him, and so it was more challenging to work in a time when Daniel could also fit in and be safely used, because we were living in a farm community. The families that suffered accidents that were tragic, and so that was always still niggling at us. And our kids are very well versed in farm safety. They know lots of things that they have to know to live on a farm, and so we erred on the side of caution too much, maybe with that firstborn, to get him involved in farming. I regret not using SCC more for our son's higher math. He did not go away to college well-equipped for the higher maths at all. I didn't know how to teach physics, never took physics. I couldn't do all that. And his dad wasn't good at using the textbook that I had and teaching him, and it was too confusing to teach him the way Dad knew physics and the way the textbook knew physics at the same time. So I would have used SCC more for that. But I heard a homeschool mom speak at one of the conferences, Diana Waring. I don't know if she's still speaking. Anybody knows? History is her main thing. But she was very reassuring. Probably the kids were all probably in junior high school by the time I heard her. And she said, you will always have gaps in their education. And she said that is an opportunity to rely on God's provision. And so in the case of our son, he had to get a tutor for physics at college level because that's where he was. And I was able to tell him then about this homeschooling message that I'd heard. Yeah, you have a gap, and that gap is probably mostly my fault. But now what are we going to do going forward? Can't go back, and so we got to go forward. And then there was one thing that I'm not sure if I would regret what I did or didn't do or not, so I'll throw that one in there. I had a very slow reader, extremely slow. She was 10 by the time she could read functionally, I suppose I would call it. I don't know whether or not I should have gotten help. I'd had a 4-year degree. I focused on remedial reading. I had a lot of educational background, and I used everything I could think of, and I read and read and read on how to teach her how to read. And yet most of it, but I also knew from homeschooling books that sometimes and from my college education, that sometimes it's just developmental, and some kids just aren't there, and they will get there, but they're not there the same time. Like the 4-year-old and the 6-year-old at our house, the 4-year-old learned how to read over the 6-year-old's shoulder when I was teaching him how to read. So I never had to teach the 4-year-old how to read. She taught herself how to read. I taught the 6-year-old how to read, and over many years I taught the older one, or the younger one, how to read. So I'm not sure whether I should have gotten more help or not. It turned out well. She went away and went to a 4-year college degree and did extremely well at college and figured herself out. And that's what she said. I figured it out, Mom. I just figured it out. And I'm so glad that she did. And then I have a few things that I do not regret, but I could have. And I want to throw those out because I want you to know that sometimes stepping outside the box is worth it. Those decisions that you haven't made that you think, I don't know if I can do that, I might regret that, I don't think I should do that. We had another child that was challenged in math, and I knew developmentally, and it carried over to piano because she couldn't count the measures or the notes. And so it was 2nd grade. So in 2nd grade, we skipped all textbook math and we took a year off piano. And I thought, we just gotta wait. You can't go on in math until she's got these certain concepts. You can't go on in piano until she has these certain concepts. We waited, and then 3rd grade, she bloomed. I didn't have to teach in agony for a year of 2nd grade. And we tried everything, and we did it outdoors, and we did it indoors, and we did it with all sorts of manipulatives, and nothing was getting those concepts through. So just time, and then her brain turned on in that area. Another thing I do not regret is not putting grades on anything until high school when I had to have them for a transcript. The grades didn't matter at all, and until they matter for the hoops you have to jump through later. And so I don't regret having them know whether they were doing well or not doing well. They were just doing what I gave them to do, and they did it. And we didn't usually go on until they got concepts anyway, so it didn't really matter whether they got an A or a C. They weren't moving on until they got the concepts well enough to build to the next ones. We don't regret pausing our homeschooling to get the kids involved in demolition and reconstruction of our remodeling of our house, in part because you really can't homeschool in the midst of all of that sometimes. You just have to pause, even if it's a few months. Sometimes you have to pause to go forward. And then learning styles. That was a really hard thing for me. I read some books on learning styles. I can't remember the name of the author I liked best. But one of her questions was, always just keep asking yourself, what is the point? And so if the point is that they get the work done and they do it well, what does it matter that that child does best laying on her belly on her bed with the radio blaring? And I sit at a desk quiet, and I can't do anything unless it's quiet, and I'm at a desk or a table. And the others were everything in between that. So I don't regret, I regret that it wasn't soon enough, but I don't regret that we let them do their work wherever and however it worked well for them. They all didn't work well sitting at a table with it all quiet. And the oldest one, the oldest one is your experimentee. And so
Sorry.
Yeah, so he,
Super sorry.
so he sat at desks a lot longer than the other two did, and I really don't know what would have helped that one because he was distracted up here, and so I don't know how I could have helped him focus any better. But maybe letting him pick his location and his environment might have helped some. So there's a mix of things I do regret and things I don't regret, and just how hard it is to make those decisions that you could regret, and really you can, but you won't know till you try. So let yourself have a little leeway. You can always go back.
That's probably how we started homeschooling. Was we decided, we only have to do this for kindergarten. We can change our mind. But anyway, and we're still doing it. So, one thing, I don't know what happened with us or what, but spelling, that's my biggest regret, and I kind of struggle with that because I know that there are, the public schools are saying spelling's not important, and one of our children actually went to a learning because of struggles they were having, and this was later. I mean, they were older when they did this, and they were told, we're not going to worry about spelling. And almost all of my kids had said, I wish I was a better speller. And so we tried a number of different things, and I'm just not sure what it should have been, or what we should have done, and maybe they just never would have, I don't know. But I keep thinking back to the list that we had when I went to public school, and so you had a list on Monday and had to write sentences and had a test on Friday. So I keep thinking maybe I should have done that. I really don't know what the answer is to why they didn't get that, and I think that probably relates to my next point. There is a great sense in which I believe that when they need it, they'll get it, waiting. But there's in other ways I would be a little bit more structured. I probably started off, you said you start off in the desk, and we talked before I started homeschooling or when I did. And so I maybe went the other way, because I remember thinking that my oldest, I don't know what is going on, he's standing on his head, he's doing, whatever, but he could answer the question. If I'd asked him what I had talked about, he knew. So I figured that was okay. And I think it was, but there are some things I would have just tried to be a little bit more structured on. And I think that leads into the language arts, spelling's in that. Language arts was easy for me. I love to write, I love to read. But none of my kids, it didn't come easy for. And so I know that God's timing is perfect, but what I wished I would have done was discovered Institute for Excellence in Writing sooner, because that seemed to really work for all of the kids once I found it. So I don't know how you can change finding something, but and I asked all my children, when I got these questions, I said, what should I have done different? What do you think?
I did that too. It's kind of funny what they said sometimes.
And I got some funny answers, I thought, but one of them was that I should stick with the curriculum. And the one that told me that would have worked, with the traditional curriculum and just stuck with it and done it. But I did need to search for different answers for other children. So I don't regret looking for what would work. I think that I tried some things that probably were a waste of time, but you don't know until you try. If something's not working, you kind of got to give it up and try something else.
Those poor oldest.
So I don't know. There's probably lots of other things, but that's what sticks in my mind the most. So.
I know what Sharon was saying about the gaps and all that, and I found that to be true. I mean, I confess I've spent a fair amount of time angsting that they're missing big things or whatever, but if you think back to your own schooling, if you went to public school, I mean, there was gaps all over the place there too, and our whole life there's going to be gaps, and it's okay. And I think just being able to, it was just really freeing to realize that you're not going to do a good job all the time. And sometimes just depending on your life circumstances, the schooling is really crummy. I mean, that's just the honest truth of it all. And I know, sometimes when I had my youngest baby was really fussy, and so I can't say that my kids were getting top quality education that year, but it's okay. I think if to the best of, to as much as God gives you grace, if you can be loving and cheerful and just be happy with what does happen and try not to beat yourself up for how much better it could be. And I know I would tell myself sometimes, meanwhile, the kids at public school are having awesome education all day long from qualified teachers, while my kids are barely got their reading and math done today, And just remembering that that's not necessarily why your homeschooling is, so that they have the best awesome education ever. And I have too seen with my kids, some of my older ones, when their interest in, how God, when He directs them, He gives them gifts and things, they've learned things that I didn't teach them. And so it's not, I think if you can take the pressure off yourself that you are the sole responsibility for their education, and that God is really good at providing. And it just, I don't know, I see so many times how he works through our inadequacy. And my oldest daughter, she had the lamest language arts for a few years in there when she was in junior high, and my dad was sick, and we just had some really sketchy school for a while, and she's doing really fine. That's like she's really doing fine in that. And I just looking back and I see how, it's okay. And like sometimes they just need to maybe make up some stuff, or learn along. It comes fast when they're ready for it or whatever. I was also wanting to speak to your spelling, because that was one of the first things I wrote down for things that I've still trying to learn to do differently. So I was a good speller in school. Like I did not have to do a thing. In my family, I was a Steiner when as my maiden name, and Steiners could spell well. And so, in my family, be like, oh, she's a Steiner speller, or whatever. And so I kind of assumed that my kids would know how to spell just like that, And my oldest actually does. And so, as your homeschool mom and you're teaching your first kid, and you're like, look, she's nailing the spelling. Don't need to worry about that. And lo and behold, the rest of my kids are not that great as spellers. And I also went to school to be a teacher. And when I was in school, they were like really big on developmental, like spelling. It's not a big deal. I mean, they hardly even thought you need to teach spelling formally until maybe, I don't even remember what, like, I don't know, 4th grade or something like that. They said it's just developmental and accept all of their, spelling and all that. So I was like, okay, we're good. So, we did do spelling, I think, starting in like 2nd grade or whatever, but I didn't really worry about their spelling in their daily work and all that. And as my kids got older and like they're not like becoming amazing spellers, I'm like, okay. So one thing I have been working out with my younger ones is just like when they're in their daily work, like if they're not spelling something right, being more like, hey, this needs to be spelled like that, or also just teaching them strategies like, you should try hard to spell, and like if you're writing stuff that you can see an example of it spelled right somewhere else, you need to, take the discipline to do that or whatever. And I'm like you, I'm kind of like, I don't know if I'm doing this right or not, but I mean, I don't know. I just felt like, and I know my son, that he's a junior, and I know usually when you're in high school, then you don't worry about spelling anymore, but I said that I was going to keep giving him spelling lists, and if he got an A for the year, then he didn't have to keep doing it, because so he did, and he got an A. I think it was an A-. But I mean, I don't know, just trying to communicate to them to put more. I mean, I think it just takes more work probably for some people than others. I don't know, and I don't know. So and also I find myself second guessing things, so I can't decide, like, is English important, or, like grammar and all that, or, is just right. Lots of writing practice, like, am I pushing too hard, or am I being too easy? And so with curriculum too, I'll be like, should we stick with the curriculum and follow the schedule? Which then you get through the curriculum, but like I don't want to miss out on like doing the fun stuff that they really remember and that really sticks with them. So I think just trying to find a balance with that. And I don't know if either of you have any insight on that, but I know anytime we've done things that are not with the curriculum, like we have a really great time. But
I'm part of a homeschool assistance program, so I have and actually there's, I don't know if there's 6 or 7 supervising teachers in the group. So I can bounce ideas off of them. And one thing that more than one of them has said to me repeatedly is the public school doesn't get all the way through their books, and so that has helped me relax a little on, well, we've got to get through this book by the end of the year, and if not, they're missing something, or, and so you're right, it's hard to find that balance, because there needs to be some relaxation in it and some enjoyment, but to find that balance between we don't have to complete the book, and let's be gone all the time, and enjoy everything else. I mean, I think that's what I'm saying the language arts is, because that's what got dropped easily for me, maybe because it's harder to grade, and I don't know exactly what it was, but it seemed like that was maybe a little bit less important, and now I wish I'd have focused on a little more. So I don't think we have to worry about checking off every box to get through the end, but I do think we need to, make some effort to make sure there's some learning there, because it seems to me like language arts, whether you're spelling, you're reading, you're speaking, says a lot about you before someone meets you or before they get to know you. So I just, I have a child that's, well, not a child anymore, but was really struggled with learning and is now finding themselves in a place where they need to be writing messages to people. And, it's not something where you're necessarily going to always use spell check, or most of you know if you do use spell check, it doesn't always work anyway. And on phones, it allows you to spell things wrong if you want to. And so I just think it's important as far as what we're putting forth, even as a witness. People are more likely to listen to us if they think we're intelligent when we speak about God or anything else. So, that balance, that's the hard question.
I think that is the hard question. I wrestle with that, and because I don't know.
I do have a spelling thing.
She has a spelling thing.
We did teach spelling,
Good
and
answer.
I loved spelling when I was growing up, so that I didn't mind teaching spelling to kids. But and the kids and I all have learned how to spell better through spell check on our computers. I'm not an excellent speller, and it's an I or an E. I'm not sure. So I like it when spell check works. It doesn't always work, like you said. The older two figured out when they spelled a word partly way, then the spell check would drop down and they could pick the right one. Well, the youngest one's spelling was so bad that she didn't ever get close enough for it to. So the option on the drop down, one of those options is add to dictionary. So she added to dictionary. And so then all her misspelled words were now correct on her computer. And so that was not a good thing. So that's where it did not work.
The other thing is when you start spelling it and you think, well, that looks like what I think I'm spelling, and that's not the word at all that you're trying to use. So.
But yeah, agreed. And we all have that quick to judge when we read something from anybody. You read something from a public schooler and you go, well, are they being taught anything?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
somebody could do the same thing for any of our homeschool kids.
Mm-hmm.
Are they being taught anything? Do they know anything? That's not even a proper sentence, that kind of thing. And so we're quick to judge that when we don't even know what they've been taught, what that child's skill level is, no matter what their age is. And so I think we need to also be careful not to judge when we don't want other people to judge ours for the same reasons either. We want them to be patient with where our children are, and even if they don't know where our children are.
And I know that too with when I was saying how I'll struggle with do we do grammar or do we just do writing? Is there, and because yay for they can name every noun and verb on the planet, but if they can't write a sentence, well, what good does that do? So I know that, I don't know. But we did have them do grammar, just not the whole time. And so I asked my kids, I was like, well, what do you think? The older two, I'm like, are you glad you learned grammar or not? And my daughter said, and they both said that they saw value in that. But I am glad that, but I know your writing really does, people really do judge you by your writing, and prospective employees and that sort of thing, employers. And so, you do want to try to help them to be a good writer.
Well, for me, writing is my first love, and it has been since I was really, 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 really young. And so that was the thing that I could easily focus on with them, and it got hold of some really good curriculum early enough on too that was very helpful. But I still had two kids at college who would call me that night and say, I have a paper due tomorrow and I need you to proofread it for me. So if I email it to you, will you proofread it right now and then call me in an hour and then we can go over it? And they were like, because this teacher is a real bear, or whatever, and they wanted to make sure that they were doing well enough. And that was an enjoyable thing that we could do together, even when they were at college level, that we could go through. And I would just, say, well, look at this sentence. Is there another way that you could word that sentence that would make it flow better? And so it was more a different way of teaching at the college level that they could figure out. I didn't go through and tell them, do this, do this, do this. It was like, well, let's just look at this differently. But it was something I loved to do, and so they benefited from that, and they all write well. But I have to tell you, I learned two things from those two kids when those essays came home for me to grade. One was a really cool essay that our son wrote on his backyard that he didn't need in Nintendo or all those things, that he had his backyard. And that was a really cool thing to realize how much he appreciated just having the freedom to play as a child. And then the other one was our daughter was a speech communications major. But this essay was all about her changing her major from speech communications to speech pathology. And I read the essay and I went, is this a hypothetical essay? What's going on here? And so we're going over it. I said, now, at the end of it, I said, now, is this really what's happening? Did you just change your major? And she goes, oh, didn't I tell you? Yeah, I changed my major. So sometimes you learn things the hard way that way, too.
One thing that I've learned the hard way too is to work on my patience level and not getting frustrated when blowing up when the kids are struggling on something academically, and like just learning to adjust to different kids, because like, you know, my first 2 kids maybe sailed through a certain curriculum and did well with things, and then when my middle one, my third child, got to it, it was really hard for her, and I'd be trying to explain and she wasn't getting it, and then, you know, next thing you know, my voice level gets a little bit higher and louder. Like, louder is going to help anything, I don't know, but and then you see her kind of shutting down and like tears, and then I'm like, oh wow, I am really mean. And you know, I think that I had to learn the hard way that like the relationship is way more important than this stupid curriculum that worked great for my other 2, but it's not necessarily working for her. And so, I mean, just being able to be like, okay, this isn't working, let's figure out what does. And I mean, not that you want to just, as soon as you have a little bump in the road, abandon your curriculum and then get all new or whatever, because, I mean, I was always kind of cheap, and I just wanted to keep doing what we had. But being willing to switch if something's not working, and I don't know. So that, I don't know. And my kids said, I asked my kids too, and they said they don't like it when I have them do corrections or catch up on weekends or evenings. And they said they don't like it when I assign weird books to them to read. So.
Well, thank you guys for these ideas. Eventually, if we have time, I'm going to open it up for questions, but I did not bring a pen to write down my own questions, so I'm going to ask one because there was one in the Relationally one, and I've already forgotten it. So, for the IEW, what age did you start that?
Oh, wow. I'm really big on doing what I can as a group. So, I mean, which is probably why I have a problem with the one-on-one thing. I can't remember. I know I at least had 3 of my students, 3 of my kids start. I don't know what grades it would have been. One would have been in high school, and one would have been more like middle school, and one maybe upper elementary to middle. And we all did the same one. It's kind of we did an upper entry level for IEW. They have I can't even think what it's called now. It just really goes through the basics, teaches outlining and note-taking, and, you know, how to dress up sentences, they call it. And it was just really, they do it in a fun way, and methodical at the same time. I don't know how to, it just really fit, and everybody was interested, which didn't usually happen for everybody. And maybe to be interested in the language arts stuff in writing or reading, and part of it is the presentation from that the first one is a video instructional course, and they really thought he was funny. Pudwa, right? Is it, you know?
Andrew Padua or whatever.
Yeah. So anyway. So I think it's like there's like a 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, and they have like levels A, B, and C. I can't remember. I'd have to look it up. I mean, if you went online, there's recommended ages to start with, and it's just a little more. They teach the same things, but maybe the subject matter's, you know, not quite so silly when they're the older learning it. So. But they have you can go online and see what's recommended, and they helped me. I found it at the Iowa Homeschool Convention, and I was able to go there and talk to them and tell them, these are the kids I have, these are their abilities, where should I start? So that's how I picked it. So niche is a great place to get too much information at once. But it's a really good resource.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about it. So you're like a multiple person.
Yeah.
It's been like, this is a great institution. So. And then I was going to say, the one child that struggled with reading and then went on to excel in college, am I remembering right, she was also valedictorian? Yeah, so that's encouraging to, yeah. All right, so the next question is, if you could change anything socially that you did with or for your children, what would it be?
Well, I would have invited friends much more often to go on nature walks and go to parks, because then I could have felt like I was doing both, you know, a field trip and having the social time. But there are so many places like Stars Cave and Wildcat Den and Big Hollow and Geode. There's just so many treasures nearby. But it's only been probably the last 10 years that my love of nature has like ramped way, way up. And so I forage and I take pictures of wildflowers and figure them out and that kind of thing. So I didn't have as deep a love for that when they were younger as I do now. I still had it, and we still took nature walks and went to parks and stuff on our own, but I would have just definitely invited more families to join us. And I had several friends who would have been very willing to drop the textbooks and come for a walk in the woods for a while. So I wish I'd done that. And then this is one, again, that I don't regret but could have. We were involved in community Bible study in Fort Madison from the time that they were 2, 4, and 6 until the oldest was in 3rd grade. And I stopped at 3rd grade only because I needed more time for homeschooling. So we only homeschooled 3 days a week for kindergarten through 2nd grade, except for the one day was actually community Bible study, so they were doing Bible study, and the other day was homeschool activity day, so they were doing homeschool activities. So there were 5 days, but 3 were the academic at-home days. And so we don't regret that at all, but I did have to break from it after the 3rd grade so that we could have more time to do the academics at home. And then the girls and I actually went back when the son was already away at college. The girls and I went back because they had a teenage community Bible study at that point. And so we were able to return to that when the girls were working at their own pace and could figure out how to work out that. And then they had their social time through that community Bible study as well. So. But that was a challenge too, to decide, will I regret not staying home more? And when I had to pick which would I quit? Would I quit homeschool day or would I quit community Bible study day? I thought, no, I need the moms. I need the homeschool moms for me, and the kids needed their homeschool. The kids had their homeschool friends either place because that's who was there at community Bible study. But I needed the homeschool moms, that focused time with the homeschool moms. So that's why we quit community Bible study instead of quitting homeschool activity day. And I wasn't going to alternate. That would be too confusing.
It's encouraging to have this group. I'm glad that you started it, Olivia, in that, because I agree with Sharon that interaction with other homeschool moms was really helpful to me as my kids have been growing up, and lifelong friendships there that were created. And when I read this question about what would I change socially, at the risk of sounding like I did it all right, which I didn't, my first answer is I wouldn't really change anything. We attended all the events that our small church put on, and we encouraged our kids to go to like regional youth gatherings, and they always went to the weekly sports and homeschool sports and classes. So I felt like they had a lot of social interaction and with a variety of people. One of my daughters told me that I should put on there that all of them played sports for the public schools, which I wouldn't necessarily put on there as a need, but it's interesting that they all did that. We never told them they should or anything, but they all wanted to try it out. And one just played 1 year, and others played more than that. And that maybe leads into there's another question about the outside world. So that kind of goes into that gave them some experience with somebody other than their Christian friends that they were around more often.
Yeah, I actually, that's just something that I would kind of stress about. I'm like, are they going to have enough social interaction? Because we live on a farm, and we live about, I don't know, 15 to 20 minutes away from any town or whatever, so like it's kind of like, well, I can't just be tooling around all these activities all the time, and or having them maybe do I don't know, go to school for art or something like that, So anyway, I asked my kids, my older kids, my teens, I'm like, what do you wish I would have done differently socially? And do you wish it would have had more social opportunities for you? And they're like thinking for a while, and they're like, nah. So I was like, all right, well, that's good. So, but I wish, like Sharon said, I wrote that I wish that we did a better job about inviting families in and friends over more often, because I think that's where you can really build relationships, and I don't think that we do a very good job about that. And so I wish that we did better with that. Part of the problem is part of the year is very busy for farming, and so Sunday night's about the only night of rest, and we want to just do that. So also I wish that we would have done a better job about calling, visiting, inviting, or whatever, the kids' grandparents or other special older people in their lives. Just been more intentional about that, because those relationships are really important, and I think it means a lot to the older ones, and so a lot of times I'd be so busy and I wouldn't do it, and I wish that we'd have done a better job when our kids were younger. Other than that, I felt like, between family and church, and our kids are involved in 4-H. When they were 10, they were allowed to be in a sport if they wished to, or pick up a music instrument. And so, and we actually participate in a weekly Bible ministry for kids in our little town of Oakville that our kids have always helped out with. And so I feel like they've had a lot of different opportunities to be with a lot of different people. So it's actually surprising. I was worried about it, but they actually have more social interaction than I thought they would. And I feel like it's, I don't know. How you're raised and your circumstances, everyone's are different, and I feel like it doesn't really matter in the long run. When you're older, I think trying to have a stable home life, and encourage the kids to get along, and so that they have their siblings, and just seeing what happens. I don't know, like with the other opportunities, I don't know. I've learned not to stress about the social part. Teaching them to be kind and respectful is a lot more important than making sure that they're at every social event that's out there, but I don't know. So
we were blessed with grandparents nearby. We live on a farm too, but my husband's parents are just on the other side of the buildings. And
nice.
That was such a blessing for me, because my mother-in-law would take our kids, like she'd take the young ones that weren't in school, and she'd take them to the nursing homes.
Nice.
With her. And
double
and
duty.
It was just amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing that as well with my grandkids yet, but hopefully I can work in some time for that. And my parents have been very involved too, and just having the kids over and spending the night or taking them to events or whatever. It's been very helpful. So I encourage anybody, as they have the time or opportunity as you get older, and maybe your kids are not around as much, or you have more time to do that kind of thing for others, because that's been such a blessing.
Yeah, it's like all the way around.
Oh yeah, it's been great. So I haven't been able, I didn't do this on my own as far as homeschooling. God obviously is doing a lot and doing it all, but He's put so many people in our lives that it really hasn't been an effort to socialize too much. I need to cut back on it probably, more than trying to. But anyway, so that's been good for us.
Well, thank you. Any practical tips for inviting more people or more friends over? Like, since you're on the back end, you're kind of still in the midst of it, but that you could look back on and think about.
I like Sharon's idea about going for the walks and things, or if you're going to the park, to invite some others over. All of us live a distance from town. It's not. I don't know you well enough to know, but from what you've said, so it is hard to get people, you feel like you're asking them to come all the way to your place, or it takes a big chunk of the day to go to somebody else's. But it is good to try to put that together, and even if it's just like once a month, or maybe even not that much, but you invite another family to go and do something, or maybe you work out a babysitting arrangement too, that then your kids can interact with other ages. If you have all young kids and you have someone older come over and help watch the kids while you're doing something, or I don't know, but I like the park idea.
Well, and a willingness to take the time, because homeschooling was not a big thing when we were homeschooling. We drove to Carthage, Illinois, and to Keokuk, and to Fort Madison, and those places, that's where our kids' friends were. And so we did the drives. We knew that if we were going to see friends, we were going to drive for 3 hours that day, just round trip. And so it was a day. We went down there for the day. They came to our house for the day. And we just said, no school today. We're just going to play today. It's a mom's and a kid's play day. And those were really important times. But the willingness to commit to the amount of time it takes to spend time building those relationships. And the relationships, the girls have a friend that they were all three in each other's weddings, all three of them from the homeschool groups. So that was one friendship that was a lifelong friendship. The only one I think of really that's a solid long-term friendship that they had that was their peer. Because we took the time to build the relationships. Most of the others moved away, so we didn't continue those relationships for that reason, but it's just a willingness to let go of the academics.
That's the hard thing.
It's a hard thing. It really is a hard thing. But just keep reading those homeschool books where they say things like, we had this one year where we were all sick, or the mom was sick, or the pregnancy was rough, or whatever, and they know they didn't get quality education those years, but they still learned.
Well, the last question is, if you could do one thing differently in preparing your children for the outside world, what would it be?
This is the most emotional one of all of them, even though our last one moved away. Well, our last two moved away the same week. So they've been gone from home for about 12 years already. So I'll start with the girls. We had a unique situation where we had the middle child use SCC as her senior year, and then she graduated the next year from SCC. And our youngest was due to graduate 2 years after that sister, but for other reasons, we hurried up her education, and she used SCC for her senior year, and she graduated she didn't graduate from SCC, she transferred class courses, so they both left home at the same time, 6 days apart, I think it was. So they both crushed us within a week of each other. One got married and moved away, and one went away to college, and that was as rough as the first one leaving, to have both of them leave at the same time. And I do remember the youngest one saying, the circumstances were very unique, and I was laying in bed one morning, and all of a sudden I said, "Oh Lord, you want us to graduate her a year early, don't you? And send her to college." And she came to me within hours of that moment and said, "Mom, I think I need you to graduate me a year early and send me to college early." I said, "Well, I guess that's the Lord saying it, because he told me, and then he told you, and then we told each other, so I guess that's what we're doing." And that's one of those rare, probably happened 3 times in a lifetime times where you just knew that that's what God wanted you to do. But what was special about the girls' time at SCC, when their classmates found out that they were homeschooled, they were in shock, because they were like, you're not weird like all the homeschoolers we know. So the girls thought, wow, we're not weird. They weren't sure if they were weird or not until their peers said, you're not weird. And so that confirmed for them that they were going to make it in the real world, because they weren't weird. And I know Brian's, one of his comments is, I want my kids to be good academically, spiritually, and I don't want them to be weird. So,
we tell our kids sometimes, quit being a weird homeschooler.
And what is that really?
I don't know.
I'd rather they be a weird homeschooler than what I've seen in other types of education. So I'm happy that they are. Anyway, I also was very impressed that they could manage community college without my help at all. I knew nothing about how to upload a homework assignment onto a computer. I mean, the tech part of SCC, and they took some online and some they attended. And the tech part, I was totally clueless on it. And they just all figured it out or asked their professors, and they just figured it out. So that was impressive to me that with very little tech background at home, they had their own computers, but with very little training in tech for any of us, that they could manage doing that tech side of community college.
I'm guessing because you taught them to be independent and to be seekers.
Maybe. And then the hardest one was when we took our firstborn to college. It was 2006. So it was hard for many reasons. That was the first year of ongoing chronic pain for me, and it was the worst year. So it was a very emotional year for being very heavily into chronic pain his whole senior year and the first part of his college. But we took him to college. He went to college, it's 10 hours away. So we took him and dropped him off that day, which was very emotional to begin with. And then we're back at the hotel halfway home that night, and I'm still not asleep, and all of a sudden at midnight, I am bursting into tears and waking Jim up, who'd already been asleep for probably 2 hours. And I want to call Daniel. I want to call Daniel. You're not going to call him. You'll wake him up. He's a freshman at college. He's not going to be asleep at midnight. Let me call him. Let me call him. Well, it was a good I didn't try that night anyway, because he didn't have his voicemail on his college landline set up for 3 more days. So we didn't talk to him for about a week anyway, and it was before most kids had cell phones, and he did not have one. And so that was very hard. But what my husband said that night, when I was sobbing, I was saying, I have so many regrets, and I just want to call him and make sure he's okay. We just left him a few hours ago, but is he really okay? Because I remember seeing his face when we left, and he just looked at it was Geneva College where our denomination is, and he just looked across the river with this look that he was just ready to explore. He was just ready. The look of confidence on his face when we left was really, really helpful, as were his dad's words. When I said I had so many regrets, he said he would not have turned out to be who he is if you hadn't done everything the very way you did it. Regrets and all. And so, my husband doesn't even remember saying the words, but those words were very impactful to me, that it's going to be okay. He's who he is because of that. And that helped me then to let go of the girls as well, because they're who they are in spite of all my regrets. And so, I guess more than anything, the Lord and my husband and the kids themselves gave me the reassurance that we had made them as ready for the real world as we could have, even though we had regrets. So.
She's got me crying now.
Sorry.
There's probably all kinds of things I could have said with this, but I have a daughter that's been at a 4-year school and has graduated there, and just in some of the conversations with her, I think one of the things I'm not exactly sure how to have changed it, because we did do some public school things, and so they did have a lot of interaction with different people, but it seemed to take her by surprise that there would be people out there who were non-Christians and weren't repentant of sins that they were doing, but they were fun and nice and kind. So how I wish that wasn't a shock, and that we'd have been able to, I don't know exactly how to prepare that better or talk it through better. I just never really thought about, I think they knew. I think part of the struggle is, around mostly Christians growing up, and as Christians, we're all sinners, and there's just as much conflict there as anywhere else. And so there were a lot of struggles with friendships and that growing up. And then to go and find people that weren't Christians that maybe you got along with better, and to balance those kind of influences and to figure out where those friendships fit in. Because we do. I mean, we have friends that are not Christians, and that's the way it should be. I mean, that's how we be salt and light. But just to try to not have that come as a shock would have probably been a good thing. So that's my main, what I would do different, but not quite sure how.
Well, I was thinking about this question, and when I think about preparing our kids for the outside world, what my fears would be as being homeschooling all the way through, my fears would be, that they'd be naive to like just the world or whatever, and also that they'll have inexperience in dealing with all kinds of people like that you would get if you went to school every day, just different personalities and teachers and different kids and all that, which, I mean, may be a good thing. Honestly, I mean, I'm glad for them that they don't have to deal with that all the time. But and then the other fear was that they would have inadequate schooling, that they weren't prepared for the real world or whatever. But I know my oldest daughter, she went, her senior year of high school was done at SEC, and she's doing her second year now, and she'll finish her program this May. But she said that I asked what if she felt prepared for the outside world, and she's still just newly along the way. But she said that she felt like we taught respect and communication, and I know it was surprising to her when she went to college to find out how people just not do what they were supposed to do, just their basic school requirements, or show up an hour late to class, and just things like that. And so she's been adjusting well into that college life, and she's enjoyed, the new experiences that she's had. And my son, he's able to work with his dad on the farm a lot, and he said that he enjoyed all the aspects of learning to deal with other people that way, just other farmers that will do custom work for, and that's kind of his thing. And so, and he's working, he's helping an electrician because he wants to be an electrician when he is done with school, so he'll do that during the day and then work on school in the evening right now. And he I don't even know. I mean, I do that. The naivety is a concern, But I feel like, having different experiences with other people who aren't Christians, and having them as part of your life helps them see all kinds of people, and see how to be and not to be, and that, and also just when you're at home, teaching your kids to be hard workers and to be responsible and to be kind. Those things, those core values are what are going to help them to succeed in the real world or whatever. And a lot from what I hear from talking to other people, I'm at home, but and my husband's a farmer, so we're not real high profile people. But I know different people that work in, places that have a lot of employees in that, and they'll just comment on how it's just really hard to find someone who's just dependable, honest, and hardworking. And I'm like, oh, I can do that. I can help my kids do that. And so I think it takes the fear factor out of they're not going to be ready. And like what you said about how they figure out how to fill in gaps of things they miss, and that just realizing that God's a whole lot bigger than my little homeschool. I don't know. He can do a lot of things that make up for my lack. So.
Well, do you guys have any questions for our panelists? So I remembered my question for the Relationally one. And you were saying that from the beginning you wanted to have a relationship with your kids, and that was more key than academics. Is there maybe one or two things that you can look back on and be like, yeah, we did these couple things and that really helped with the relationship?
I think from when they're little on up, we kind of I had them help me with what I was doing, whether it was chores or laundry or out in the garden or whatever, or cooking or something like that. I remember sometimes you'd be in the kitchen and they'd start dragging the bar stools up, and you're like, hey, this is gonna be fun. But like, and it was like flour everywhere and everything, but like, I really look back on those memories, like, those were great. Like, when they really just want to be with you, and like, sometimes we get overstimulated, and we just like, I just want to be by myself. But like, to not do that, because like, I feel like when you invest in, like, welcome them into your world and let them be a part of it, like, pretty soon they weren't like spilling flour everywhere, and like, hey, they're really kind of handy, you know, they can like do this thing for me or whatever, and we can like visit together and have a good time. So I just think and being on a farm away from people too, and you have a lot of time to like do fun things together, and not just the school and not just the work, and also just the praying. I really feel like the praying together, and that does a lot to draw hearts together. I don't know, it's just, there's a softness there. I don't know. So I'm sure there's plenty of room for improvement, but just, that.
I have a question. First of all, thank you for coming and sharing. We appreciate that. Do you have like a number one, each of you, like book, resource, or like a mentor or a person that you're like, I know you mentioned, probably mentioned books or something. You're like, this book really helped me. It's hard to do that. Or like or like I think you mentioned a speaker or a conference, or I went to the homeschool Iowa conference last year, and it was a lot of information, really helpful. It's always nice to have other resources.
I don't know where, like you are with children. 3 things come to mind when you say that I didn't all follow very well at all, but they were still very helpful. And one, I think, is it Ruth Beachick, that has a reading and an arithmetic and language arts, that's basically all you really need in the beginning, and she shows how to use kind of daily life and pretty simple methods. I love those 3 books. Like I say, I didn't follow them as well as I would like to have, regrets. I don't know, my children were kind of spread out, but yet there's still 4 of them to deal with. I didn't do anything spectacularly, but her books were really great. Another one, it's called Freedom is Real Education, and I think it's Terry Camp, and I don't even know if that stuff's still out there because I'm old. But she had so many practical ideas, and some good books about kind of balancing motherhood and schooling. She has that book that has just a lot of practical tips in it, and then she has more of just a book that you read and glean things from, and it's talking about if I'm diapering the baby, or if I'm diapering the watermelon, where's the baby? Something like that. So she's practical in what, she's been there and done that. And the 3rd book I think of is Educating the Wholehearted Child. And I don't have a clue who that's by. Can't remember that.
Is that a Clarkson one?
Yeah, it might be. And all of those, I didn't do the whole book by any means. I mean, long shots from what, but there's just really practical things that you can pull 1 or 2 out and use those. Maybe if you're a lot more organized and together than I am, you can get more than 1 or 2 out of them. But
I was always picking and choosing too.
Yeah. So those are ones that come to mind. And I gleaned a lot from the niche conference. And when I was first starting out, I'd go there and I have to do all of this, and I got to look at all the curriculum here, totally overwhelming. And I've learned to, this one looks like something I learned from, and I go to it, and that might be what I go to and think about for a while. If it's totally not applying to me and there was something else that might be interesting, I'm not afraid to walk out of the room. I've learned not to. I used to always sit in the front so you could get it all, but I've learned to kind of sit in the back and I'll go to something else. Because there's a lot of good information and it doesn't always fit well with your family. And so.
I think that's important too, to make sure, because sometimes sounds great, but then it doesn't fit with your family. Like, I kind of was interested in classical conversations, but I'm that when I kind of looked more into it, I'm like, that will not fit our family at all. And so, just there's, we're all different things.
I would say ditto on Ruth Beechick. Those were really 3 very handy books to have, and everything like spelling while the kids bouncing up the steps or catching balls back and forth and things like that. So it was learning styles that I learned about in learning modalities that I learned about at college: the visual, kinesthetic, auditory, and tactile. Learn in all the different ways, because some kids learn best by hearing, some by seeing it, some by fine motor, and some by God have their whole body involved in the education. And so it really gave me the ways to do it with all of them different ways, which is easier to do when they're little.
Right.
And so those were
That's
really
fine.
good for the littler years. I can't ditto on the niche conference too. And at first I would go and be overwhelmed by the curriculum, because there wasn't that much curriculum way back then, but there was enough to be overwhelmed by it. And so then I didn't focus as much on the speakers, although I did pick and choose and go to the different speakers. But later, when I didn't need the curriculum anymore, or very much of it, I could really focus on the teaching. And I went almost every year by myself, so it was nice to be away for a day or 2 days, an overnight, actually. The only time I was probably ever away from the kids for that long. And the one that impacted me the most, that I wished I'd heard him years before, was a man named Mark Hamby. He's a Lamplighter, is the company. They're bringing back old classic books into print, things you wouldn't have even heard, classics that you wouldn't even have heard. They were good literature for children, especially to read way back when. But he was the keynote speaker that year, so there were several talks that we got to hear of his. And every single talk I was like, is he living with us? Is he in our house? Or is he in my head? Is he in my heart? Because he was speaking as a very humble parent, admitting his failings as a parent, especially in his anger, which I struggled with, and in his desire to truly present the gospel to his children through a real relationship with the children, to help them realize your dad needs a savior and forgiveness as much as you kids do, and maybe some days more than you kids do. And so it was very impressive. And then later, Paul Tripp, I never did the parenting one, but his other books are very good on just the whole, what the gospel really is and how to live the gospel before your children and yourself and the Lord. So those would be the main ones I can think of.
I would highly encourage the parenting book by Paul Tripp. If any of you guys haven't read it, it's really helpful for just presenting the gospel to your children all the time. So.
I haven't read the Paul Tripp book, but the Ted Tripp book was really impactful to us, the parenting, or the shepherding the child's heart. And also Marilyn Boyer, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Marilyn and Don Boyer's ministry, but her book, Parenting from the Heart, was really impactful to me. I'll reread it just every once in a while and get inspired again. But and also I felt like I got good wisdom from Terry Maxwell, Titus 2 Ministry. She has some books that were helpful. And so, yeah, I don't know. Just there's different ones that I've really kind of just you glean things from. And the Rachel Jankovic, the Loving the Little Years, that actually was really, I don't know, I read that at just the right time, and it helped me too. So.
Where is the niche conference?
It was in Des Moines when I went, but I don't know where it is.
It was in Coralville for a couple years,
I was
and
going
then
to say
I think
they've had some issues with location, so they've moved around a few times. Yeah, it's been in Coralville.
Did it go back
It's
to Des
been
Moines?
Yeah, I think last year it was back in Des Moines. NICHE, Network of Iowa Home Educators.
Christian homeschool
Christian
educators
home-
or something like that.
Christian Home Educators. Homeschool Iowa is their website. Homeschooliowa.com.
So they are. That's.
Yeah, that's who. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is this the homeschool? I think do they maybe even call it the Homeschool Iowa Conference now?
Maybe they do now, sorry.
I just realized it a couple years ago that I was trying to Google for forums, and I was Googling niche, and I was like, oh, they call themselves Homeschool Iowa now.
Yeah, they
so.
do, sorry.
No, I know, I just turned the page very recently.
You have it in your head for so long.
You
one
do.
way. But yeah, it's just Homeschool Iowa, so.
And there's been a lot of families that have dedicated a lot of time to niche. Some that from the very beginning that were really, they sacrificed a lot to be the leaders of the homeschool group in Iowa, the Iowa, to do that conference every single year. I was just very thankful and impressed. I kept seeing the same people and the same names, and I went, they're still doing this. They're still doing this. And so
many hours put in to put that on.
I mean, they do it with lots of volunteers too, but they do the lion's share of the work.
So that would have been the one in June.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was huge. I thought it was all very big. Wow.
Any other questions? Well, I guess in closing, is there any press
On the way, and they are homeschooling, but they are both homeschooling because they both work part-time type hours, and so and they didn't start out that way. They started out with the first one in Christian school, and then it was so far away across town, and they wanted to be more involved in their kids' lives, and so they switched to homeschooling, and that's going well for them. And then our second one has two. We're going to go to a birthday party this weekend, and they're trying out public school in Madison area. They're in a smaller town, Waunakee, up to the north, and so they're choosing those options, and we continue to pray for wisdom in their parenting and in their lives. And then the other one, the middle child, is their firstborn, and they've been married for 12 years, and they have a 1-year-old, and we'll go see him last. I think he's last on the list. He's not walking yet, so we haven't missed those first steps yet. But just keep praying for your children and later your grandchildren. They need it, and they need us to do it.
I don't know if I have any last words of wisdom.
I don't really have much words of wisdom, but just give yourself and your kids lots of grace, because you're have a lot of grace with yourself. It's a journey, and you're going to mess up a lot, and it's okay. And just pray a lot and ask God for wisdom, and I don't know, just keep on doing it because it's worth it.
Well, thank you, ladies, all for being here. I've taken a lot of things to heart and a lot of encouragement and just ideas, and so thank you for spending your time here, investing in the next generation. Our next speaker, or our next event is coming up March 4th, and our speaker is Brenda Plannell. She is talking on making school fun. So she is wife of Brian Plannell for 36 years and mother to 11 crazy kiddos. She has spent 26 years wrangling kids and at the same time attempting to bring the joy of learning front and center in her home in the heartland of Indiana. In spite of the fact that she has a degree to teach 6th through 12th grade English, that's interesting that we were just talking all about that, so maybe we can pick her brain, and 4 years of experience in teaching at and directing 2 Sylvan Learning Centers, she forges ahead into the wild frontier of homeschooling, unlearning much and researching everything, even after decades of field experience. It seems the terrain just keeps changing under her feet. Garnering wisdom from those who went before her through mentorships, linking arms with commiserate travelers in various co-ops, and pulling resources from the plenty that surrounds this generation of homeschoolers, she bravely tallies forth into her last decade of teaching at home, occasionally abandoning the routine and sharing the joys she has found with other travelers. So that is who we can look forward to on March 4th. So I think that we have about 20 minutes until we need to get kids and wrap up. So I was supposed to come up with some discussion questions and I forgot. So talk amongst yourselves, maybe talk about just something you've learned, something you want to take away and change, and maybe pick individually these mentors' brains. So anyways, thank you for coming.
He has to turn them off somewhere.